Hello, I'm Ellen Vince, coming today from Wheaton, Illinois, in the USA. Welcome to Impact, a podcast about how we can each bring about real change in the world and getting practical in making that happen.
And hello, I'm Clive Johnson, coming today from Leigh-on-Sea in the UK. A special welcome if you're listening for the first time, and a big thank you to our new subscribers. Each week, we look at one aspect of how we can connect our hearts to offer healing for others with our collective intention, prayers, and meditation, and go behind the headlines of a critical happening in our world that needs our attention right now.
In today's episode, we take one of these regular deep dives to more fully understand and tune in with something many of us may know only a little about, and see where we might hone in with our prayers and intentions. And as we record, it's February 10th, 2026.
This is going to be interesting. I didn't tell you just now before we came on. When just before we connected, I don't know how I did this, but I stared directly. I've got a candle burning away here, and I'd come back into the room, and for whatever reason, my eye caught it. And you get that imprint. You
Yes.
just stare at a blinding light. It's still
Yes.
there. So
Oh,
I'm reading
no.
words, and they're kind of
Oh,
a bit fuzzy in place.
oh, no.
So we'll see how we go.
Okay. Well, good luck. This is about good news, but that's not good news,
No,
Clive.
well, hopefully we'll go by the time we finish. So, as our recent episodes have reflected, much has been going on since the start of this year that might give us cause for grave concern. Recently, the doomsday clock, this is this indication offered by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, a group of scientists, of how close they believe humanity is to annihilation based on things like climate crisis and how close we are to all-out war and so on, announced in its latest assessment, surprise, surprise, that we are closer than last year and indeed closer than ever to this terrifying prospect, edging to just 85 seconds before midnight.
And midnight signifying the end of the world, I'm assuming.
The end of the world. As I
Great.
understand the atomic clock, though, it can go backwards.
Okay.
They could have assessed, should we be better off this year? But they didn't.
Okay. Yeah. Here we go.
Here we go. The horrors playing out in Minneapolis and Iran are among many pictures of polarization, conflict, and the seemingly irreconcilable tragedies playing out around the world. Understandably, our news headlines are dominated by such stories, as well as many others of deep public interest. The revelations coming from the latest batch of the Epstein files offer another example, certainly playing a very important part in what's been going on politically in the UK in the last week there, were one needed. Of course, it is right and proper that we focus our attention on these, and as we do, seek to understand where our intention and prayers are most needed. However, as we perhaps don't remind ourselves enough, it's also good to occasionally stop and give thanks for the many good things that are happening in the world, many of which do not make it to the top of the news headlines. We usually do this at the end of the year, don't we? But why not do it near the beginning? Why not do it near the beginning?
A few times. Let's keep doing it.
Exactly. Yeah. Not only does this give us some relief from the intense energy that holding intention for the many things that are wrong in the world brings or can bring to bear, but it is the important, really important counterbalance to intention work that we must embrace, and in doing so, enjoy and feel uplifted by. So this week, we turn our attention to the good that's been happening in our world so far this year. This will be a bit of a potpourri of different things, selected and offered in no particular order, just to give a flavor of some of the many good things that are happening, which we can, and as we say, we believe should give thanks for.
Firstly, we might mention several steps being taken toward ending major conflicts. These remain complicated and may not prove to be win-wins for all, but as we know, Europe, the US, and Russia are engaging to agree a possible peace plan to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. By late December last year, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that a comprehensive peace plan to end the war was around 90 to 95% agreed, with an expectation that a full agreement could be finalized early this year. including fully agreed security guarantees and military provisions. Even if negotiations have been slower than hoped and deadly attacks continue, the fact that most points are agreed represents a substantial diplomatic opening, more than where the two opposing sides stood several months ago.
Mm, mm. Nearly 4 years in now, of course, that particular
Yeah,
war. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And in the Middle East, the Gaza peace plan is now moving into its later stages. The multi-phase peace framework for Gaza, primarily brokered by the United States with support from Qatar and Egypt, has continued to move forward, including commitments to a long-term ceasefire, Israeli withdrawals to agreed lines, and expanded humanitarian access. The second phase of this plan formally began in mid-January, making a significant shift from intense warfare towards a managed, monitored ceasefire architecture. There are, unfortunately, still bombings going on in that corridor that we read about in recent days. The Rafah crossing reopened last week. If humanitarian aid flows across it reportedly remain severely restricted. And as we said, specific targeted attacks by Israel have continued. But these haven't reignited the full-scale conflict that had raged for the past 2 years. The number of trucks carrying aid remains below the agreed 600 per day at around 459, according to the Associated Press, while the Hamas-led Gaza's Civil Defense Agency reported that more than 500,000 people had returned to Gaza City within roughly a day of the ceasefire's first phase taking effect, many of whom have been internally displaced within the enclave.
It's a huge amount of people to return in one day.
It is, isn't it? Extraordinary. And it just shows the desperation to get back home, essentially, and
Right,
find out what remained.
right. Wasn't much, was it?
No.
Across the Mediterranean, the African Union has started the year with a focus on reconciliation. Its Peace and Security Council scheduled an open session at the end of January, marking the African Day of Peace and Reconciliation, designed to distill practical lessons from different countries' reconciliation efforts and strengthen its capacity to support peace processes across Africa. While symbolically modest, these institutional practices help embed peace building and reconciliation as ongoing priorities rather than one off events. Civil war does continue in Sudan, while fighting continues in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, where fragile peace settlements have often been violated. However, last week, the UN welcomed signs of progress in talks aimed at reducing violence in DRC, as talks between the Congolese authorities and M23 rebels, mediated by Qatar, continue. The warring sides signed a document earlier this month setting out the terms for monitoring ceasefire that was agreed in Doha last November. So while conflicts continue, agreements remain fragile or are falling short of what was promised as they are being implemented. But progress is being made in several of the major conflict zones that have dominated world headlines in recent years. We should give thanks for these developments and will that continued progress will be made.
Mm. In the area of social protection, and especially in the protection of children and reducing violence, several countries have seen progress in the opening weeks of this year. Among these, France has moved to shield children from social media harms, taking steps to restrict or more tightly regulate children's access to social media, which is part of a broader push in Europe to protect minors' mental health online. As with many countries, France is closely watching the experience of Australia's ban on social media use for minors, which came into force last year. To this end, in mid-January, the UK government announced plans to drive action to improve children's relationship with mobile phone and social media, announcing the launch of a consultation on children's social media use the following day.
Staying on Clive's home turf, England has seen murder rates falling sharply in recent months,
Mm.
falling to its lowest level since 1977 in the year to September 2025, according to data collected by the Office for National Statistics. Observers say this reflects longer term trends in violence reduction and criminal justice reform. We may understandably hear about the more sensational individual crimes, but not appreciate that the underlying trend is moving in a positive direction, at least in England.
Mm.
Reason to take note and give thanks, of course. Contrary to the way it's apparently sometimes portrayed in some US media, London is not a lawless citadel under Sharia law and actually is one of the safest large cities in the world, with its homicide rate being among the lowest for any major Western metropolis and significantly below cities like New York, Berlin, Paris, and unfortunately, Chicago. In fact, London Mayor Sadiq Khan said that last year London had the lowest murder rate per capita since records began, the fewest murders of those aged under 25 this century, and one of the lowest number of homicides for almost 3 decades.
That's quite a
Yay,
that's
you
quite
guys.
something, isn't it?
That
Really,
is
that is quite
great.
something. I mean, it's never
And I
reason to never reason to be complacent, of course. And you know, there's still serious knife crime, and it's not to minimize
right.
any
But
any.
we really don't hear about London being a dangerous city.
No, well, I've had the impression, and I've not seen this firsthand, but certainly there's some reports from some of the media in the US
Oh.
particularly. I think it's some of the political
Mm.
classes there that Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, who's Muslim and has been anti-Trump
Oh.
for a while,
Mhm.
actually, since the
Mhm.
first. There's no love lost, shall we say.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that's partly behind it, but I've heard stories of London being portrayed as this Sharia-led
Oh,
dangerous place that, don't
no.
go there kind of thing, which is, it just doesn't bear
No,
any
no,
relation to the place I know. And
no, and
certainly
I
if you look at
visited lately, so I can concur, yes.
Yeah, if you look at statistics like this, at least on
Mhm.
the homicide. But in New York City, another Muslim mayor, Zoran Mamdani, was sworn in as New York City mayor on the 1st of January. This took place in a subway station in a ceremony framed around inclusivity and commitments to tackling housing costs and inequality. This is one global city where a shift towards equity-centered governance is being promised from the very top. Mamdani, like other mayors and governors, has already proved himself ready to call out anti-democratic action and to speak truth in the face of adversity. A courageous leader at a time when such courage and conviction is desperately needed.
That's for sure. I hope he is successful.
Yeah.
That is for sure, because there are a lot of people who are hoping that he isn't, and that's not fair. We should also mention some notable progress on environmental and climate matters. Firstly, the latest monitoring has revealed coordinated crackdowns on persistent forever chemicals like PFASs in water and consumer products, alongside research into carbon absorbing fungi and other natural based solutions for carbon removal. These steps, though incremental, contribute to long term reductions in toxic pollution and support innovation in climate mitigation.
The world has also set a new record related to nuclear weapons, going for its longest period since 1945 without an explosive nuclear test, the last being in 2017 by North Korea. However, this is an achievement that we shouldn't take for granted, as the long-standing new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty between Russia and the US, which places legally binding limits on nuclear stockpiles, expired last week with no replacement yet agreed. I was actually reading an article in The Economist magazine this week on this very subject, on the real fear that a new nuclear arms race is on, and China wants to catch up, essentially. It has a certain stockpile at the moment. I think there are currently 9 nuclear powers. They include India and Pakistan. We mentioned before that
Mhm.
they're not the friendliest of neighbors. South Korea being very worried with North Korea's build-up. I think it's estimated to have something like 50 nuclear warheads, which is quite something, really. But the US and Russia certainly are largely expected to scale up in the coming years, which is really
Well, let's try to stay in the good news.
let's stay on the good news, indeed.
Meanwhile, India, which we've heralded before as being a green hero, has publicly reiterated its commitment to meeting net zero and renewable expansion goals. As one of the world's largest emitters and fastest growing economies, sustained policy commitment in India has global implications. Also from India, a good news climate related story. Local environmental notes from Mumbai in January 2026 recorded light rainfall brought the city's air quality index down, providing temporary but meaningful relief from hazardous air pollution levels.
Yeah,
It'd be interesting to watch India
it,
as
it
they
is.
grow.
It is. Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. And in the world of conservation and biodiversity, several wins are worth mentioning. Among these, last month, the IUCN Species Survival Commission and partner centers shared new evidence of successful conservation actions for sharks and rays worldwide, including improvements in specific populations and habitats where protections and management have been strengthened. And this is important because many shark and ray species have been in steep decline, and reversals show that where you have these targeted interventions, they really can work.
Also, some heart-lifting wildlife comeback stories that have started the year. I love these stories.
Mm, mm,
One review published last month highlighted that tiger and rhino populations in Nepal continued to recover, supported by robust anti poaching efforts. Yay! Habitat restoration and community based conservation that rewards local protection of wildlife. Similar trends were noted for Amur tigers in China's Northeast Tiger and Leopard National Park, where expanding habitat and anti poaching measures have led to more
cup.
frequent cub sightings, not club sightings. All right. And in Kenya, conservation field workers noted that in Kenya's Shimba Hills, Arabuko Sokoko Forest, and other landscapes, intensified anti poaching patrols and fencing have already changed wildlife behavior. Elephants, zebras, and buffalo, once rarely seen by day, are now regular visitors at protected water
Mm,
holes. These are early but tangible signs that ecosystem protection measures are beginning to restore more natural, less fearful patterns of animal movement. So may that continue.
indeed, indeed. Very encouraging, isn't it? It reminded me a little bit of what happened during lockdown. I don't know if it was the case where you were, but
Yeah,
suddenly there
yeah.
was less traffic on the roads, less fumes, less people around. Suddenly there was an abundance of wildlife in
Mhm.
suburban gardens and so on.
Move that doomsday clock back.
I think so. I think so. Very significantly, Brazil has moved to recognize 10 additional indigenous territories and their lands, collectively protecting millions of hectares of tropical forest in partnership with those communities. And in neighboring Bolivia, another comeback story, a tiny fish, long thought extinct, has resurfaced in its native streams, a shining example of how habitat protection can turn the tide amid deforestation threats.
Eco Hustler magazine also reports that the Ocean Cleanup Initiative has surpassed 40 million kilograms of plastic removed from oceans and rivers,
Mm.
a historically large volume of pollution taken out of aquatic ecosystems. That's amazing.
It is, and that was one of our intentions, wasn't it, way back when? But
Yes.
over,
Yes.
yeah, around microplastics. Yeah.
Yep. And as you say, we mentioned in previous episodes, ocean conservation achieved a major milestone when the High Seas Treaty came into force on January 17th, ratified by 83 parties as of the 15th of January. Although some major marine powers, notably Russia, are not party to it. This covers protection of the high seas and deep seabed areas that lie beyond any country's national jurisdiction, roughly half the planet's surface and about two-thirds of the global ocean. It commits a global framework for protecting biodiversity and managing human activities on the high seas so they are sustainable and
Mhm.
better regulated. As we noted before, it will be actions rather than words that matter. However, we believe the fact that most members of the UN did come together to agree to protect so much of the planet's surface is a major achievement.
Mhm. As we said before, the UN kind of at its best, really.
Yeah.
It does still have these major achievements that
Hmm.
perhaps hard to imagine otherwise. And finally, Here in the UK, there's a news program. They always have what they call the "and finally" story. Usually not quite so serious to the headlines. If getting much more specific than some of the stories we've mentioned, a story of how a neighbor in a quiet residential area began quietly transforming a frosty bus stop into a small sanctuary of kindness for strangers, simply by leaving towels and comfort items for people waiting in the cold. It's not actually reported where this happy incident occurred. It was just one or two sources I could find. It didn't actually say where it was. Although a photo of the bus stop suggested it is in one of the snowy northern US states or Canada. So one bitterly cold morning last month, a woman returning from her walk noticed her neighbor pop back outside without a dog, carrying only a towel. The neighbor went into the local bus shelter by her house, laid the towel on the cold bench for anyone waiting, and then went back indoors without speaking to anyone or seeking recognition. Someone later shared the moment online, describing how this neighbor had turned an ordinary bus stop into a place where people had clearly thought about the comfort and dignity of whoever might arrive next. That's really the story here, isn't it? She was thinking of others. It was a small, practical act, but it captured how everyday tenderness can come through winter harshness and social anonymity, reminding people that they are seen and cared for. A beautiful example that we might want to follow, as we're sure many of our listeners do. It reminds me, actually, a few years ago, I went on a trip to Shetland, the Shetland Islands. I'd never been there before, the most northerly islands in the UK. And I went, as I had to the most northerly point, which wasn't very easy, actually. Fortunately, I met a guy traveling from New Zealand who had a car and that could take a certain distance, and you had to walk over quite dangerous cliff edges almost to get to this most northerly point in sight of a rock on which was built a lighthouse where the father of Robert Louis Stevenson apparently used to be he was an engineer, he built lighthouses, and apparently he lived there. And this was the island of Unst, the most northerly of the Shetland Islands. It's on the same level as Bergen in Norway. So it's a long way north. And the most northerly settlement there, little village, I can't remember the name of the place, but it had a post office, of course, where you could get your stamp. There was I think a daily post bus stopped there. And there was this shelter, which was totally decked out. It had an armchair and bookshelves and
Oh, nice.
it was all sorts of creature comforts, really, because the idea was, of course, you might have a bit of a long wait for the next bus.
Oh, I love that.
They were lovely people up there. Were extraordinarily hospitable. Amazing, really. So much to be grateful for, even if some of what we mentioned, especially in the area of peace settlements, remains fragile. Let's will the continued progress will gather apace through the remaining months of this year.
So this week, as we contemplate the many positive stories we've given you to give thanks for so far this year, we suggest holding as our main intention. We give thanks and open ourselves to the joy of sharing the experience of good news in the many stories that we've heard, and will for continued progress and the encouragement we all can take when major challenges are faced, with a resolve to honor the highest good. Please join us in holding this.
Absolutely. That about wraps it up for this episode. Remember, you can connect with us in the Facebook group and for live intention holding in my daily Insight Timer offerings, and with Ellen in the Labyrinth Activist Network's Zoom calls. Details of how to hook up with these are in our show notes. Look out too for our next special topic episode, which we'll be releasing in the next few days. Thank you for listening and for sharing with us in holding intentions. We look forward to connecting again next time. In the meantime, thank you, go well, stay safe.
And remember, we're more powerful together.
Impact is presented by Ellen Binns and Clive Johnson and produced by Impact Productions. Our theme music is by Chris Collins and our logo artwork is by Auto Classic. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, or your favorite podcast provider. We're a non-commercial podcast dedicated to people of any faith tradition or none who yearn for healing in our troubled world. Please pass on the word so others may join us in making an impact. Thank you for listening.